What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Savvy, and welcome back to the Savvy Show. And in today's episode, it looks like we have another unique SCP on our hands because legit the name of this SCP seems like it's a question. This SCP is why was this mummified corpse turned into candy? SCP-1176. So we'll see why in this episode, because I can't even come up with a more random title. So with that being said, if you guys are excited for this SCP animation reaction, please let me know by smashing that like button if you do enjoy the content, mind you. And also smash the sub button, join the family, and then hit that bell so you can stay plugged for each and every upload. And now, without any further ado, let's get this show started. Alrighty, SCP-1176. Lego.
If you've ever studied ancient Egypt in your history class, then you're probably familiar with the way they buried their pharaohs.
There we go.
When a king of Egypt died, their body would be entombed in a huge sarcophagus, usually after being mummified. Mummification was the process that the ancient Egyptians used to preserve their dead, safeguarding a corpse with special chemicals and the application of cloth almost like bandages. This was done to keep cadavers from decaying, usually because of the belief that this would carry over into the afterlife.
Yep.
And it wasn't just the Egyptians that practiced mummification either. Mummies of human beings or animals have been found on almost every continent in the world. Sometimes a body can even be accidentally mummified through exposure to extreme cold, lack of oxygen, or other environmental factors that help keep the deceased preserved.
Well, damn, I always figured being frozen alive or being frozen after you're dead wasn't mummification. I always considered that just being something completely different, but I guess it will follow under the lines of being mummified, preserving your body for the afterlife, I mean. Just another unique way to go about it. Let me know if you guys thought the same thing too in the comment section.
Fun fact, the oldest recorded mummy isn't even one left behind by the ancient Egyptians. It is actually a naturally mummified severed head, estimated to be 6,000 years old.
For real?
It was unearthed in South America in 1936. Yes, corpse preservation techniques can indeed be strange, but none are stranger than SCP-1176, also known by the nickname, the Mummified Man.
Mummified Man.
Now, as you may have already pieced together, the Mummified Man is a mummified corpse, but not quite like the ones you would expect to find buried in the pyramids.
Is he still alive?
Estimated by Foundation researchers to have been a man in his mid-30s when he died.
Okay.
SCP-1176 is a corpse that has degraded so much over the centuries that it has made DNA examination impossible. According to some of the SCP Foundation's best minds, SCP-1176 is possibly of Arabian ancestry, and thought to have passed away sometime during either the 10th or the 11th centuries
Just
AD.
like that? That'd be sad.
This is certainly not your ordinary mummy, and it definitely isn't like the kind you'd see in a cheesy black and white horror movie or on an old episode of Scooby-Doo.
Oh god. The only black and white TV shows I used to watch when I was younger was Twilight Zone. Oh man, I used to binge watch those tough when I was younger. That and what was the other one? Tales from the Dark Side and Tales from the Crypt. I used to watch all the creepy shows. Also, Courage of the Cowardly Dog. That was one of my favorite cartoons as well. I used to love that shit.
SCP-1176 is absolutely, undoubtedly dead by all clinical definitions. It doesn't show any signs of breathing, and the processes of blood circulation or metabolism have long since stopped. However, despite the decay suffered by the rest of the body, SCP-1176's brain seems to have remained intact for almost 10 whole centuries. Not just intact, but active. The Foundation's researchers have confirmed that the brain has a constant level of electrical activity, consistent with people experiencing Stage 3 non-rapid eye movement sleep, known colloquially as deep sleep.
He's in a coma?
So, a mummy with an active, albeit dormant brain.
What?
How does an ancient culture manage to achieve preservation like this? Alien technology? Cryogenic sleep chambers? Suspended animation? No, not quite. SCP-1176 exists in its current state in part because the body has been mummified. Now, this was a process a lot like mummification, but instead of wrapping them in cloth, a mummified man, or a human mummy confection, was created by submerging a dead body in honey. According to historical records, elderly men in Arabic countries would sometimes willingly volunteer themselves for this process. Why? Because the goal was to turn their bodies into a healing confection. In other words, an elaborate sweet delicacy created from a preserved corpse. That's right. Ancient cultures had candy made from dead people.
That's not real. That can't be real, is it? If that's real, I'm about to be really spooked. I'll be surprised I didn't know about that.
All the information the Foundation has gathered about SCP-1176 seems to point to the body being one such mummified man. When extracting the remaining bodily fluids from the corpse, instead of finding blood or other normal substances, Foundation researchers discovered that SCP-1176 was full of a viscous gold-colored liquid that they designated as SCP-1176-1. Further testing of this fluid revealed it to be, you guessed it, honey. Specifically, it was a type known as clover honey, made by a species called the Anatolian honeybee. This stuff was everywhere, filling SCP-1176 entirely. So much so that honey was even coming out of the body's pores. This is due to the nature of the mummification process. Typically, before death, a person who had offered to sacrifice their own body would stop eating any food. Instead, their diet would consist solely of honey and nothing else.
Makes sense.
They would even bathe in it, submerging their entire body in the substance inside and out until their sweat and even their feces were pure honey. This honey-only diet would eventually kill the donor, and their corpse would be placed in a stone coffin, which was also filled up with even more honey. After approximately 100 years, what would be left was human mummy confection, a honey-based candy of sorts that could be then sold at street markets for a high-value price. Why was it so expensive? Well, not just because it was literally made from a dead person, but also because this confection was believed to possess rare and powerful healing properties.
Really?
Everything from the common cold to broken bones was said to be cured by it.
Did it actually, though? That would be kind of cool. And if that was the case, I wonder how that's even possible. Wow.
Despite it leaking out of SCP-1176, the honey doesn't seem to ever run out, even when tested under varying conditions. It seems like the Mummified Man actively produces more of the sweet golden substance, acting as the source rather than a container with a finite amount.
Oh, that would be interesting, because that's probably possible because his diet of just strictly eating honey is coming out of his pores and his poop was honey and everything. That's probably because the honey is like now his blood, you know? So like say like if it was blood instead of honey, you could always have an endless amount of blood if the person's still alive, so you could continue pumping blood. It would make sense. Crazy, but it will make sense. It being honey though, just in this universe.
And yes, it is still edible after several centuries. In fact, it contains an abundance of essential vitamins and nutrients.
Just like wine.
According to the Foundation's testing, the honey produced by SCP-1176 can suppress the feeling of hunger for up to 18 whole hours. And there are no long-term side effects for most that eat it.
Wow.
However, this is not the case for everyone. The Foundation has learned that any person without the blood type AB positive will have a severe allergic reaction should they consume any of SCP-1176-1. The symptoms include acute hemolysis, which means the red blood cells won't break down properly, and renal failure, which is when the kidneys stop functioning. This all results in death for most of the subjects without AB-positive blood who were fed SCP-1176-1.
Dang.
The symptoms for these unlucky people were the same as receiving an incompatible blood type after a transfusion. In 1985...
Makes sense, because the honey is now the mummified person's blood now. He doesn't have blood. His blood is the honey. So it would make sense they made that comparison as getting the wrong blood for a transfusion, you know? So...
The SCP Foundation launched a raid on a facility in Asmara, Eritrea, which at the time was owned by a group called the Mana Charitable Foundation. Agents had been dispatched to this facility after various rumors and reports that pointed to this location being the source of a strange honey substance. This anomalous liquid was being shipped to a number of areas in Ethiopia that had been stricken with famine. Pretty easy to guess where the Mana Charitable Foundation got all that honey, right?
Yeah.
The problem was, because SCP-1176-1 caused adverse effects on people without AB-positive blood, a considerable amount of civilians had died from consuming it.
Dang.
Hence, the SCP Foundation was forced to step in. When SCP-1176 was first uncovered, the body had been stored inside a large stone sarcophagus, as was part of the ancient practice of creating a mummified man. There was also a copper pipe and spigot, installed by the Mana Charitable Foundation to extract the honey from within. The lid, sides, and inside of the sarcophagus itself had a number of Egyptian hieroglyphics inscribed within. These were mostly spells and ceremonial texts, written as a way to protect the individual that was to become the Mummified Man. There were also inscriptions written in the dialect that was an early precursor to the Arabic language. However, these sections had been replaced with updated versions in classical Arabic. One of these read, Abdallah ibn Salah ibn Ayub ibn Nasir, 15th son of the great Sheikh illegible, was put to the fast of honey on the 1st of Rajab in the year of the Hijra 3 illegible, and died on the 15th of Ramadan. The great Imam al-Yusuf has sealed him within the ancient vessel, marked with the signs decreed by the ancients to ferment in honey for 100 years, and bring aid to the people in time of need. Much like a headstone used to mark the grave of someone who has passed, the sarcophagus that SCP-1176 was in featured a passage commemorating a man who gave his life and body to heal others. Sounds nice, right? But there was another inscription, written elsewhere on the stone sarcophagus, which translated a dire warning. "Beware, Imam, for the mark of Iblis is upon this one." According to the rest of the second inscription, the tomb containing SCP-1176 had been opened before.
What kind of
during
mark
a time
does
of
he
great
have?
famine. Imam al-Malik had ordered it to be opened so that SCP-1176-1 honey could be used to feed the starving people.
Oh, God.
Jars upon jars were filled with the anomalous golden liquid and brought to the sheik, the ruler of the land, as well as sent to the people suffering from the lack of food. However, the very next day a number of these people fell ill, stricken by a terrible fever that ultimately claimed their lives.
Because their blood's not compatible. It's like they're just drinking another kind of blood that's not compatible with their own. So I feel like the same outcome will happen to someone that was just drinking some other person's blood. And it's not the same blood as theirs, you know? They're just going to pass out or die.
Only the sheik, his brothers, and his sons, who had all eaten the honey, survived. Any others who hadn't been killed by the fever accused the sheik and his family of sorcery, and these surviving subjects attempted to destroy the body that had produced this cursed nectar.
Dang.
But when the sheik's people found the Mummified man, they witnessed in horror as the body stood upright, dancing around as it screamed and taunted the people.
What?
Al-Malik declared that the devil himself sent an evil spirit to corrupt SCP-1176. The honey confection was meant to be a means of healing,
How did it
but
just
it
come
had
back up?
been corrupted. The sarcophagus was then sealed, and the inscription on it finished with the following caution to any that found it. "May God strike down any who would break these seals." Countless centuries later, once the SCP Foundation had recovered SCP-1176 and the sarcophagus containing it, they began testing with the Mummified man.
Don't open it.
Their goal was to determine how much of the SCP-1176-1 honey the ancient corpse could produce, perhaps in the hopes of using this substance as a form of hunger-relieving field ration for their operatives. Removing the body from its sarcophagus, Foundation researchers placed SCP-1176 on a metal grate, designed to drain the honey as it was produced instead of allowing it to build up. Over the course of several hours, more and more honey seemed to be produced, beginning at a rate of almost a liter per hour to almost 56 liters every hour. But then, after 10.5 hours of producing what seemed like an endless flow of honey, something unexpected happened. The deceased body of the Mummified man, dead for hundreds if not thousands of years, woke up. Foundation staff detected a spike in brain activity. If you cast your mind back to earlier, you'll remember that SCP-1176's brain had managed to survive and stay intact long after it should have decayed. The Mummified man opened his eyes and immediately started to wildly flail around. He made a number of distressed sounds, the long dead body trying to crawl towards the outskirts of the testing chamber.
That wouldn't make any sense. His body should be rotten and dead. Like, I can understand his brain still being active, but his body should have no motor functions. It's not capable of moving. It's full of honey, bro. Oh, no. This doesn't make sense. The brain part makes sense, but him moving and flailing like that? Like, no.
Thanks to so many of its organs and muscles having withered away over the years, SCP-1176 was barely able to see or understand its surroundings.
Okay, but how is he moving though like that?
It couldn't speak. Not properly anyway, given that its tongue had long since decayed.
Just like
the
his whole body.
Foundation's personnel moved in to try and restrain the ancient and now animated body, hoping to sedate it before SCP-1176 caused any lasting damage to itself. Eventually, staff were able to force SCP-1176 back into its sarcophagus, slamming the stone lid back in place and trapping it within. They could hear the once human creature screeching and vocalizing from inside, bashing against the inside of the stone coffin with its head and limbs.
Oh my God.
It took 3 whole hours of this for the Mummified man to return to its usual state, by which time its ancient bones were fractured beyond repair.
They should be destroyed more than
SCP-1176 is
that.
a sad tale of a man who had willingly given his life to be a source of healing for people in need. He allowed himself to be mellified, turning into a confection that could bring an end to famine. And yet somehow, this was corrupted and turned into something that spread fever and pestilence. For now, the mellified man sleeps, but his brain is still alive inside. While he might be asleep, he may never be able to rest.
Dang.
Now go check out
That was an unfortunate fate. Is he actually dead then? It feels like his body's just dead, but his mind's still active. I legit feel like if you do some type of brain transplant, it would be perfectly fine because his brain's completely normal. Oh no, this was a pretty cool SCP, a cool concept for one. I really like how they handled the honey part and how it's compatible with certain blood types. That's really cool because the amount of honey that they made became a part of him. Like it's part of his DNA, you know? So like I really like that part. But if you guys enjoyed it, let me know in the comment section below, and also smash that like button. Let's get 60 likes on this one, and also smash that sub button, join the family if you're not already part of it, and hit that bell so you don't miss an upload. And now unfortunately that concludes today's episode. However, I'll catch you guys on the next one.